Welcome to SaasHoles, a show dedicated to issues within the software as a service industry. We are revenue ops with an edge. Hear that? Edge. Jamie, Jason, KG, and myself, Pete, we have a combined 100 years of making interesting decisions. Please subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Today, we're going to chat with SaaS industry vet Will Emmons CRO of Renaizant. Did I say that right? Renaizant?
That is correct.
Renaizant. It's an AI-driven performance management platform delivering actionable data around diversity and inclusion. But before we get to Will, this episode is brought to you by NeuroNoodle. Hey, parents of athletes, get a doodle of your noodle. It's a brain map before the season starts, so you have a baseline to compare it to. Hey, you get a physical every year, right? Well, get a brain checkup before the season starts. Schedule an appointment now at neuronoodle.com. Hey, a lot of football camps are already going on. It takes only 20 minutes to get the data you need to ensure the quality of athletes' future life. Carney.
Pete, I think the guys at Bishop Sycamore should get a brain map. They must have had something wrong with them on this football game that's getting a lot of press. But yes, go ahead, Pete. Your joke of the day.
Carney.
Yes, Pete. Come on, please hurry.
What's the best thing about Switzerland? I don't know, but the flag is a plus. Leave us some comments on our blog at SaasHoles.net. Shout outs, my friends.
I feel like we just did that joke.
When?
I don't know, but I feel like we just did that one.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Pete's old. He probably forgot that he did it like 4 episodes ago. You know,
I got 30 of them.
Okay, that's nice. Attack the host. Ian Minton, thank you for your service, my friend, and congrats on your new gig at Oracle.
I got one. Brian Muley, congrats, 2 years at Upwork.
Oh, really? I see that on the notes here. Now, KG, who is... Oh, you did? Okay. Mm-hmm. KG, you got any shout-outs, my friend?
I do. I want to give a big shout-out to Mary Ball. Her and her co-founder, Lucy Hillier, recently founded the Women in Business book club, and she's already got, I don't know, hundreds of people that are a part of this already. We used to work together at ZipRecruiter. She's absolutely amazing. And Pete, we're going to have her on the show late September, so we'll get to see Mary and Lucy together and talk about women in business and book club. Maybe we'll talk about the leadership app. Maybe we'll talk about, I don't know, other books that you like, Pete. Maybe
Lucy likes like the Fabio book clubs, right? Isn't that yours? Those romance novels. That's more up PJ's. That's more Pete's.
Hey man, you got the haircut for that. But don't worry, the glasses fix that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything with a lot of pictures for Pete.
Yeah. Mary Ball, Mary and Lucille Ball. I'm going to screw that one up. Jason Lee Ferrara, you got anything?
I don't have any shout outs, but I forgot to talk about this last week, which is Charlie Watts died.
Yeah.
And now I realize this isn't a music podcast. However, if you want to think about go-to-market and someone who's been successfully raising ticket prices for decades and still command that sort of audience, it is the corporate entity of the Rolling Stones. I mean, they've figured out how to package that, make it good, but make it something that someone will pay for. So there's still value there. I think a good lesson is there's still value after all these years, and you can get it if you just keep asking for it.
Well, that's what happens when you're a drummer and you know your heart skips a beat. All right.
I like the nice impromptu drummer joke. It's better than the Switzerland one.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll edit that out too.
Redeemed yourself.
No,
he never redeems himself on the humor.
Whatever. Will Emmons, old school, man. How are you, my friend? Where are you? What have you been up to? How the hell do we know each other? As you say, I am old and I'm forgetful. What's your background, my friend?
My background, I am, almost 16 years in the same company as you. That's where you may remember me from. I don't know if our paths cross that often or not, but you may remember me from there. I did a number of things, from running an enterprise office to running enterprise to running APAC, Europe, the Middle East, the world, all the above. And then, left there and spent a couple of years in Silicon Valley at a fairly large enterprise SaaS firm. And then now I'm doing more of a startup pre-revenue gig that we started a year and a half ago. That's no longer pre-revenue, thank goodness. And so, yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Weren't you also one of the guys that did marketing too?
I did. I spent a whole year in marketing. It was the longest year of my life.
That's great. So possibly we have two marketing guys on the show. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So Renaizant, what's the story? What is that? AI what?
AI what? So look, at the end of the day, if you think about performance management, I mean, you've been through it, Pete. You do the yearly fire drill, and for lack of any better term, everybody thinks it sucks. It's highly subjective. The inputs are oftentimes reliant on, did you go have beers with your boss in the last 2 months or not? Does your boss like you as a human or not? Not necessarily what you've done from a professional standpoint. So what we've done is we've developed a product that wraps AI along with integrations that we have with companies like Slack, Salesforce, Microsoft, Google, a variety of different other ones. And we pull real-time insights out, and then we actually push those insights into the performance management platform itself, so that when you go in at the end of the year or twice a year or however often you do those things, you're not trying to remember 12 months ago. All of that information is already in the platform for you, so that you can easily pull that and see that. And you'll never get to 100% objectivity, in performance. But we feel like we've accomplished about 75% objectivity in what's primarily 100% subjective type of review process today. So,
got it. KG, how do you know our friend here?
I feel like our paths were destined to clash, because there were so many people at ZipRecruiter that we hired in the enterprise division that felt so highly about Will Emmons, and other people that I kept networking with, people like John Fagan, people like Brian Carrillo, just absolutely, I absolutely think the world of Will Emmons, and feel like this guy has shaped their careers into what they are, today. And I had to meet the guy. I just had to meet the guy, and somehow we sought each other out. And his brand, lives up to his reputation. I mean, look, he just glossed right over it. That was Renaissance pre-revenue, and now they're revenue. That's no accident, and that's what Will Emmons does. He sniffs out the money, and I'm just thrilled to have him on the show. And Will, I'd love. Remember, our listeners are more like first-time managers and things like that, and I would love to hear about how you got into sales leaderships, and most importantly, what are some of those pro tips that you would give to sales leaders on how to go about doing the same and get to the C levels that you have gotten to multiple times in your career.
Yeah. Wow. It's going to be a long answer, but I'll try to get it as short as I can. I think, first of all, how I got into sales. So when I was in college, my college roommate and I started a home security home theater company. And we literally would go to school during the day. He had an old beat up truck. We bought a magnetic sign. We stuck the sign on the side of the truck, and after school, we'd go drive around, put nice clothes on, go drive around, and we'd sell builders. And then we didn't want them to know that we were just a two-man shop. So at night, after all the builders left, we went in with floodlights and we would wire all the homes at night. And that's literally how I paid for school. So my grades were not very good in undergrad. Grad school, much better, but undergrad, not so good. I spent a lot of time doing that. And so that's how I paid my way through school. But I kept doing that after school. And the one thing that I learned that I loved was selling. And so, I actually ended up signing some really large deals with some of the largest builders, not only in Central Texas, but also just literally, hang on, I'm sitting here by an actual phone for some weird reason.
Cash register, pick it up.
So anyway, in doing so, we started to expand. We started to actually add salespeople, and so that's where I got my first experience in sales leadership. Did that for a while. Then I kind of got this vision that I was going to be in corporate America, go sell big corporations. And so, somewhat naive in thought, but I actually went and
is that an old school
Voice
phone
message
answering
system?
machine? You gotta hit the button.
literally. So this is a true deal.
We'll edit that out in post.
I got to start over. Like, this is no joke. I sold my house. We were remodeling a new house, and I don't know if you know anything about where the remodels are right now, but I'm literally in my dad's office at his house right now. It's the only place I could find to do this call. And apparently he has an answering machine and an old phone.
That's hysterical.
I didn't even know they made these anymore.
That's Alice Seinfeld. I love it.
Yeah. All right. So how do we do this? Do I just pick back up or what?
Yeah, you just pick back up. He'll let
Oh, we're using all of it, but pick right up, my friend.
That's fine. So anyway, I got my first start was with Robert Half. And I got with Robert Half, started selling in their lowest level division, which was office team. I quickly got promoted into their account temps division, and I got promoted again into their IT division. And I went on to be the #1 biller in the world for Robert Half Technology at the time. And they promoted me and asked me to go to Colorado and start up new sales offices. So I did that. I opened up 4 offices in Colorado for them: Boulder, Denver Tech Center, and then Colorado Springs. And eventually moved into what they called business development director. And that job was really interesting because they would send me into primarily underproducing locations, and I would have to do an assessment and come back to the executive team and say, hey, here's what they're doing well, here's what they're not doing well, and here's my recommendations. Now, they might throw the recommendations out the window, but it was a great job because it taught me how to go in and quickly assess situations and quickly assess people. And so ended up leaving that. I actually went to one other company before I made it to Career Builder. And there I was selling large national accounts. We sold vendor management systems. And so I had IBM and XO Communications and a few others. And then I called Jason Lovelace one day, who someone referred me to. And we had a conversation. He told me to fly to Chicago. I flew to Chicago. And, long story short, he hires me and he says, hey, when you get to Dallas, there'll be a computer at your desk, and I'm going to email you. Just open your computer, log in, and there'll be 10 accounts in the email. I said, great. The next time I talked to Jason, which was like 30 days later, I think, I called him and I said, hey, man, I'm working on this deal and I need some help. And he said, what's the deal? And I said, well, it's this company, Radio Shack. And the largest deal in the company and all of Career Builder at the time was $100,000. And I said, I don't really know what to do with it. This is as far as I've gone. And he goes, well, what's it worth? And I said, I don't know, but I think I'm going to close it for like 450,000. And he was like, what? Like what's going on? Tell me more about this. And so we crawled back and I started walking through it. Anyway, long story short, about 3 months later, we closed it. I closed it. I don't give him credit. And so, so anyway, there was a woman running sales at Career Builder at the time who will remain nameless. And she approached me and said, hey, we want you to run the Dallas office. And I said, I'm not interested. And she came back again and I said, not interested. The third time, not interested. Fourth time.
Why weren't you interested? Why weren't you interested? That's I've done that myself in my career. Why weren't you interested in that? You were going to go from selling to leadership at the time, a fast growing company, and you were saying no. Why?
Because the average deal size in Career Builder at the time was $8,000. The reason why Career Builder was on the trajectory that they were on is because they were a disruptor in an industry that was, print, right? I mean, at some point, everybody had to move to print. And the backstory behind the Radio Shack deal is when I got that account, everybody said, hey, don't even bother selling them. We have all their internet spend. And I'm like looking at this thing that's $25,000 and I went out, I met with the lady, her name was Tanya Karp Green. I go, Tanya, I got to tell you, as kind of is my style, being somewhat direct, everybody told me not to come meet with you. And they said that the reason is that we have all your spend. And she said, well, that's true, you do. And I said, but there's only like 5 locations using us, and you guys have 45 or 4,500 stores nationwide.
You're everywhere.
And she goes, that's true. And I said, so if I get the other, 4,495 stores on board, then we can get that spend moved from print to online. And she said, yes. And I said, I got it. And I got up literally and walked out. Like the meeting took me 15, 20 minutes. And I went out and anytime I would go to a Radio Shack, I would go in and ask to speak with the manager. If I was trying to blueprint locations not there, I would literally call in and act like I was an angry customer and tell them I needed to talk to the manager. And then I'd get the manager, and then I'd ask to talk to their manager. And I did that, and I did it over and over and over again. And it in an extremely short time frame, I built this thing out. I launched trials nationwide, and it was just so easy. And I knew I could make so much money. That's why I didn't want to do it. And so I was just like, I didn't need to, and I'd been in leadership before, and it was okay, but I really liked selling. And so anyway, so that's why. Yeah. So I got into it. And, one of the things that I quickly learned, so I guess that's one of the first answer to your question is, how do you get into leadership? I think you have to be successful, right? I think that the most important thing that you can do is, especially as a frontline leader, is you have to have some sort of model that's replicable, that you can, you can teach people. And so, whatever that, it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. Everybody can be different, but essentially when they promote you into leadership, I believe fundamentally that they want you to go create a bunch of mini-me's, so to speak, and teach people how to do what you do the best. And so I think that's number one. Number two, and this is where people kind of fail. I think a lot of people get that. I think where people fail is what they don't do is they don't put the structure and the process and the accountability and the measurements and the transparency in place to be able to allow people to, execute on that plan and be successful ultimately. And so I think that's what I did really well is I put my people in a bubble. Like I said, back then, the average deal size was 8,000 US a year. And they didn't recognize people on anything other than deals sold. And I told my team, I'm like, look, we're never going to get recognized on a call, but if we go sell $8,000 deals, we'll all starve to death, So we're going to go do this. So that year, that office, we sold, I don't remember if it was 5 or 6, I think it was 5 additional deals that were all between 250 and 450. Nobody even came close to that as an organization. And believe me, I had people in my office in tears at times that were like, I never get recognized. I'm like, hey, good job, pat on the back, here's your paycheck, and so just taught them a different way to look at it, but putting my people in that bubble and protecting them from a lot of those not so positive outside influence, I think was really critical. And then just the way that we attacked the business. I mean, my gosh, our renewal rate in that office was 20% when I got it. And so clearly it was just a lack of focus. So we put a tremendous amount of focus into that renewals component of the business. And literally within 4 months, we went from 20% to 98% on contracts and 130% on revenue. Wow. And that office was the worst producing office in the country when I got it. And it was the #1 office when I finished it. And by the way, all of my people got promoted. Half of them got promoted into other leadership jobs and went and ran other offices. The others got promoted from, AEs to majors or majors to nationals or whatnot. So, yeah, it was a really fun time. And then, from there, it just kept going. I just continued to move up and do other things. And I go back to, and I heard, I think it was Bob Montgomery actually that kind of gave this, but, it was like every single problem is one of a few things. It's either, lack of ability. And if it's lack of ability, you got to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. Lack of skill, which you can teach, or lack of belief. And 90% of the time it was skill or belief. And so when I would look at problems, I would try to address, where are the specific things that I need, if it's a teaching opportunity, what are the developmental things that I can do to put people through? And the way that I think about development is, I think, slightly different than a lot of people. A lot of people will get up and do the talking head in the front of the room. And I always believed in doing exercises that force people to learn the skill, right? So,
Will, they in Sandler, I think you may be a fan of Sandler. They talk about improving your batting average, BAT.
Yeah.
Behaviors, attitudes, techniques.
Yep.
It's exactly what you were just saying, what Bob Montgomery would say. It's a similar ilk. That is right on. And if you can't improve in those areas, you're not. You got to make some changes.
Yep.
Your career has probably not all been unicorns and rainbows. If you were to wind the clock back and do some things differently, what would you do differently? Again, we're talking about our listeners being sales leaders, first-time sales leaders, wannabe sales leaders. If you were to wind the clock back and do things differently, what would you do?
The only thing that I would do different is my approach to people. So, if I reflect back on my early years, you can be influenced by a boss in a positive way or a negative way. You can take on their traits, whether they be positive or negative. And, I think I was kind of led down a wrong path in the way that is the right way to communicate by a former leader at one point in time. And so, and I would wrap it up like this, which is the difference between being blunt and being candid, right? Blunt hurts and it's rude and it's not meant to help people. And true candor is designed to be professional, maybe from a really positive, I don't want to use the word love because then, Pete will make fun of me, but I do think it's from a point of really compassion, right? Like I really want this person to do well and to be better. And so I'm going to find the right way to communicate so that they can hear it, receive it, and actually take it and take action with it. And I didn't always do that early on in my career. And so, because of that, I probably had some cycles with some people that, I wasted that I could never get back. But, you grow up and you mature and whatnot. But I think that would be the biggest thing that I would look back and say, I wish I'd done that a little different.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Will. Because I think with a lot of candor gets abused, you got to figure, especially inside your company, you're all on the same team. So how would you talk to a teammate, right? We're all trying to win a touchdown. The tight end dropped a touchdown pass. Are you going to go, you're an idiot and you can't catch anything? Or are you going to try to cheer him on and say, hey, next time squeeze the ball or something like that, you know what I mean? And catch the ball. You can get him next time. And that is a huge issue within a lot of companies is instead of just being critical, try to help someone out. We're going to fail together and we're going to succeed together. And we're all on the same team. And in the off season, you could figure out, do I need that teammate or not? But in the heat of battle, there's no reason for you to go after somebody and just try to get through that.
Yeah. And I think as a leader of leaders, you have to be really careful because you got to remember that, a leader that's reporting into you, it might be their first time in leadership. And so if you're moving fast and you're like, hey, you need to go tell those guys, right? Like, you don't really want them to say that, but in their mind, because they're new, they're like, oh crap, I got to go say that. And then they walk in the room and they're like, all right, bam. And so, I think you have to be cognizant of it as a new leader that, hey, when you hear those things, everybody's moving really quick. And so we don't really want you to say what we say. And as a veteran leader, you have to remember that, hey man, a lot of times they're taking your words literally. And so I think being cognizant of that on both sides is really important.
Yeah, you know what you mean. They don't know what you mean, right? And so you have to be really clear. Hey, Will, you said two things that I want to bring back up to the top, just as takeaway lessons. But I'm not kidding. I had this conversation with somebody last week about, do you have all the spend in a company? And I think if we're talking to new sales leaders, that's like an incredibly important question, because your story is great. Like you were told yes basically by the decision maker. right? And so if you stop pushing and you listen to that person, then you'll never get all that spend. Super important. And then the other is the blueprinting of an account. I mean, I don't know. I honestly, other than when we all work together at the same company, I don't know where people learn that, because to me, it is like fundamental now. And I look at teams, I mean, in all the companies I've been at since Career Builder, I look at teams, I'm like, well, show me your blueprint. You know, show me the account blueprint and we can talk about what's possible. And it's just sort of like a blank stare. You know, I'm like, well, how do you know what to do in the morning when you like turn your computer on or pick up your phone? What are you doing if you don't have that? Those two things are so important, tactical, but so important, you know? So anyway, I just want to.
Well, no, and I think the blueprinting is really key, right? So the way I used to teach this at Career Builder, and I still teach it to this day, is I would walk into a training room of all the new hires, and we would say, okay, like you've been through the training this week, you know the products. If you could put a price tag on Career Builder, if you sold Career Builder to Career Builder, what would Career Builder be worth? And inevitably, it was always about 200 grand that they would start with, and then so the exercise that I would use is I would say, okay, great, like we know this company inside and out, so let's break down our own company and let's talk about all the different people that are in leadership that actually have budget. So like Pete Jansons, what's Pete Jansons? How much could Pete spend a month without ever receiving a phone call? Now, I don't know what Pete's number was, but it's probably a lot, you know? Here's what my number
Not
is.
really.
Here's what John's number is. Here's what, or everybody's, and we would walk through that. And by the time we were done in our own company, what we learned is that HR's budget was probably the smallest, and all of the other individual line leaders out in the field had way more money. And so the number would always be north of 7 figures, always, by the time we got done. And so I think helping people understand how to go through that exercise and think through their own company first, kind of nail it, and then start to figure out, okay, wow, I really have to know my customers really, really well if I want to get to that kind of end number that you're talking about. And when you said it's kind of tactical, I would actually argue that it's extremely strategic, because what most salespeople do is you'll say, hey, what are you doing to break into the account? Well, I'm calling and I'm doing emails and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, right?
That's tactical.
That's tactical, right?
Yeah.
If I know what I'm going after and I've got it here, now I can say, okay, here's the strategies, or I call them proofs, or whatever you want to call them, that I've got to do in order to get all those different pieces of the pie. I've got to prove to Pete that I can do X, Y, and Z. I've got to show Kevin I can do these things. I've got to show Jason I can do this. And now I can build the tactical things I need to actually execute on those strategies.
Yeah, great.
One thing to note there on what you said, though, I think to enhance a little bit, is a lot of small to medium-sized companies have different divisions. There's a cost center and a profit center. Profit center is going to get a lot more freedom in spending, whereas a cost center is going to be restricted on the budget. So when they say you got all my spend, that means that's a cost center. But if you can somehow make it seem like you're contributing to the profit of the company, spend gets opened up rather quickly by the finance people.
Well, and that's a great segue into, I think, Kevin's second part of his question, which is executives. So the other way that you do that is you get to people that actually have the power to make money, make budget. And, that's one of the things that I think we mastered at Career Builder more than anywhere else. Before that, I used to tell people like, hey, if all you can do is go get existing spend, like you're not the right team member for me. I need people that can go create dollars. And so, in that, and how do you, getting to executives, we put quotas on getting to executives around, lunches and dinners and golf and, whatever. We didn't really care what the thing was, but we had specific quotas on it. From a leadership standpoint, I told my guys at one point in time, like, hey, if I don't do it, you won't do it. And if you don't do it, your people won't do it. And so, I think that's a really critical thing, that you need to lead by example when you're in a sales leadership capacity, and show your people that it is capable, or that they are capable of doing those things. So, I think that's another huge area as well.
Gentlemen, we
you
have
your hand raised over there.
Yeah, once we get a bunch of people in a room and we talk all over each other. We've had, anytime you spend decades in the same place together, unique things come up. Our unique thing was we came at a tail end of print classified advertising that turned into the internet. The internet turned into SaaS, and here we are at the SaasHoles.
Yep.
And we were leading, we were selling through it all. What do you guys think is the biggest difference during the transformation? Because you had to take your existing way of doing things, whether it's small transactional deals and turn it to long-term bigger deals. What were some of the things that you learned from teaching somebody to sell classified print ads to selling long-term SaaS deals?
So if the question's for me, I'll answer it like
Anybody,
this.
anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, when you would look at a large company, I think it was the easy sale was, hey, you hire 500 people, here's 500 job postings, right? And where the needle really moved in accounts is when you stopped selling, boilerplate solutions, and you started to look at all of the problems that they were facing around hiring, recruiting, whatever that particular problem was that you were trying to solve for. And then you got very specific on the solution offerings that you were trying to drive, right? And one of the ones I always tell this story, but I walked into UPS one day. Am I allowed to talk about company names? I guess I don't know. We'll find out if we get sued.
I'll tell you when I get to cease and desist.
So I walk into UPS and I sit down and it's this head of HR guy, and he looks over across the desk and he goes, man, I'm happy to meet with you. And they told me, their executive was going to be in town, and that's why I took the call. But I don't want to talk about job postings. And I said, well, great, me neither. I think job postings suck, so I don't want to talk about them either. And I said, what I do want to talk about is what's not working for you. And he's like, well, I got problems all over the place. And every time I tell you guys I have a problem, you just tell me to post more jobs. So I post more jobs and I still end up with the same thing. And I said, great, give me the example. He says, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I got this location there, and literally every time, it's like every time the phone rings, I see it's that manager, and I don't even want to pick up the phone because he's just going to yell at me. And so I said, well, let's do this. And we put together this whole plan. And it included videos and banners and mega posts into that market. And it was a whole campaign just directed at just filling that specific location. And literally the guy filled the entire facility that he had been struggling with for 6 months. He did it in 45 days, 150 people, I think, something like that. And I didn't charge him for it. We just reallocated his spend. And then that started more conversations, which led to other opportunities and other locations. There were other challenges. And so I think that's the biggest thing that moves the needle, is when you listen to your customers and you really try to help find those unique challenges that they don't have answers for. And you show them that, hey, there is a better, different, more innovative way to do those things.
Well,
Yeah, amen.
Yeah.
Let me jump in real quick, and then sorry, Jason. The old Sandler adage is no pain, no sale, and salespeople fail to go any further than most salespeople will. Of course, anybody who's worked for you knows to go deeper. There's a business problem, the surface problem, the business problem, and the personal problem. And most people fail to even get past the surface problem. The surface problem is, my God, I've got, I haven't had this facility in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania filled, forever. Well, great. Well, tell me more what that's causing you. Well, for God's sakes, I can't process packages, which is costing me revenue. And well, what does that mean for you personally? Well, I'm on a P&L and I get a bonus at the end of the quarter or the end of the year or whatever, based on, the efficiency in that facility or whatever. Most people fail to get down to that level, Will, to understand what the true pain is, to then get to that larger sale that solves the problem. And I tell my clients all the time, and Will, you're going to appreciate this, of course, and everybody else on the call, you can solve $1 million problem for the low price of $500,000 a year, and that's what real value is. That's what real value is, when the solution solved is way bigger than the price that they pay. And you're an absolute master of that when you combine your blueprinting in conjunction with, you know, really heavy discovery like that. It's off the charts. Sorry, Jason.
No, that was good. The first word out of my mouth was going to be amen as well, but for a different reason, which is the example you gave, Will, and then you use the word campaign. And I love the fact that you use the word campaign, because what you were able to do for that company is like this multifaceted solution, which is what a campaign is, right? We got the same message and we're going to tell it in a bunch of different ways so people will see it, rather than just say, you get one thing and it's going to work. We'll just keep doing more of that one thing until it works, you know? And I think this is larger than your campaign for UPS, and has larger implications. But I love the idea that a campaign is a multi-touch thing. We're trying to solve one problem, going to see it in many different ways. And that is huge benefit to somebody who just probably was stymied, a little frozen, thinking, all I got is I only got job postings. Like, what else can I do?
Yeah.
You know, bringing fresh perspective is huge.
Yep.
The one thing I caveat for younger salespeople and leaders in that is make sure you can answer the problems that are there. Like if somebody came to you, Will, and said, I have all these problems, the TVs don't work in my office. Move on. That's it. I feel like there was a lot of conversations when you're so desperate for revenue and the company might be not going the way you are, is you want to answer that TV question. You want to answer whatever you can to grow the revenue, and I get it, but try to focus on where the company can answer the questions.
Yeah, and I agree. The one thing I'll say as a but to that is, I think where salespeople also make the mistake, and I've seen them, like for instance, selling job postings at Career Builder, they would walk into the office and they would say, hey, I want to know about all your problems as it relates to recruitment. And all of a sudden they get shoved into the recruitment hole. And now it's like, oh, well, you know, I actually don't even handle that. That's so-and-so. She's in our HR department. You need to talk to her. And so I think you're right. When you hear something that's just, you know, way out there, we can't address, great, but don't avoid those things. We still want to know about them, because we might be able to, maybe we can help them find a good TV repairman. You never know. Or
Yes.
or woman.
Yes.
Like their infrastructure team sucks, and that's because they don't know how to hire people for the infrastructure team, or they got a safety problem because they can't, you know. So like, but Jamie, you made me think of a question, which is, Will, do you have an example of a time where you're like, yeah, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to ask him what his problems are, and he's going to tell me, and then you're like, oh shit, I didn't think of the answer to that. I don't know how to exactly address that. You know, I'm sure you have some example like that in your career. Like, how did you deal with that?
Well, you're not, I mean, honestly, I always had an answer. Even if it wasn't a good one,
I have an answer.
even if it wasn't a good one, I had an answer. And I could always, you know, I felt like I could almost always spin it into something. But I mean, you know, look, just the other day I was talking to somebody, and they were kind of going through, and I was, you know, talking about how great, you know, performance reviews are and how important it is to be proactive with them, whatever. And, you know, this lady, she was a CEO, and she goes, look, I just don't believe in them. You know, we do them once a year because my employees want to do them, and I think they're stupid, and da-da-da. And I said, well, if that's how you feel, like that's how you feel, I don't have an answer for you. Like, I'm not going to change your mind, and you're the buyer here. So I hope that works for you. But, you know, if you find yourself in a situation like a lot of companies now, and what we were hoping was post-COVID, not exactly post-COVID yet, but where there's this kind of a lot of people leaving jobs and moving on, and you find yourself in a situation where all of a sudden maybe your mindset shifts to, how do I keep my people, and you want to figure out ways to engage with them, call me back. But until that happens, and until you see it, I can't help you.
Yeah.
So I mean, the one thing about me, good and bad, right? Our strengths are always our weaknesses, is I'm always honest. And so that's as honest of an answer as I could give that person.
Yeah, sure.
Well, when you're transforming from one medium to another, expectations are key because you can customize an ad, but customizing software, that's two different ball games, right?
Yeah.
You're promising the software can do this, this, and this. You go to the developers and they're like, what WTF are you talking about?
Yep.
Right. So it's, that just a little heads up out there for you newer companies out there.
Yeah. Stay away from customization. Configuration is amazing. Customization is trouble.
Yep.
Hey, that book, what's that book about? The leadership app, Will? When did you do it? I didn't even know you had it. What's the story?
I started that. I always wanted to do it. And I started writing that, I don't know, 3 years ago, something like that. Maybe 4 years ago now. But something I always wanted to do, and it was, some of it in there is just my ramblings on, my thoughts on leadership, and a lot of it is advice, honestly, to new leaders, especially. And I think there's some really good advice in there. There's probably some stuff in there that people may take a nap through. I don't know, but at the end of the day, I really do think there's some great points. And I touch a lot of different things about leadership. One of my core pillars is around, process, accountability, metrics, those kind of pieces. And I think that's an area that's highly undervalued by people in general. And I think when I look at people that are successful, like yourself, like Kevin, who have been phenomenal sales leaders, and we get in a room and we start talking, we all have that one thing in common. And I don't think that's by accident. So I spent a lot of time on that. I talk a lot about, people and different hiring profiles. There's a bunch of information in there, but yeah, pick it up, take a look. If you're interested, would love to hear feedback. It's kind of weird. I don't know if you've written a book or not, but it is weird putting yourself out there. It's a little bit like you've taken all your clothes off and you're standing in front of people. So, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but the feedback I've received so far has been really positive.
Not at all like a podcast.
Yeah. This is a piece of cake.
Is there a chapter on, is there a chapter on communication?
Yeah, that one I failed.
Hey, preaching to the choir here, buddy.
Yeah.
But nobody ever had to question where we stand.
That's right.
Jamie?
No, I think no one had questions on where you stood for sure, Pete.
Nobody asked you. Ferrara, you got any marketing questions? When did you come into marketing, and where was Will at the time?
Yeah, so that's interesting because I was thinking about this. When I came in, Will, I think you had just taken the job in Dallas, maybe, or we're going back there for something, or just to live, maybe.
I think I was moving back to Dallas.
Yeah, you were moving back to Dallas.
I'd had enough of the cold winters in Chicago.
Yeah, well, let me tell you what. Now being here for 8 years, I've had enough of the cold winters in Chicago too. Like, I'm not sure I could go back to that as a daily occurrence. But that really is not my question. My question is, when you took the gig in marketing, like, why did you do that? What did you think it was going to do for you, and what did it do for you?
Well, I did it because Bob Montgomery asked me to do it. That's the most honest answer I can give you.
Well, you know what we need? We need like a gong call that records how many times Bob's name comes up on the podcast. It's like the chart would be huge. Anyway, go ahead.
But so here's what was going on. And Pete's very well aware of this situation. But we were trying to implement Microsoft CRM.
Mm-hmm.
And you see Pete grimace over there. And like,
it was exciting.
we literally broke it every day. And we had all of these inside sales reps on this platform. And I mean, when it would go down, it went down hard.
Yeah.
And essentially what we wanted to do is we wanted it set up to where we would just do nothing but pump leads into that system, and they would hang the phone up, and then it would just ring and they'd pick it back up again and they would go. And so I spent like, and the reason Bob wanted me to do it, he thought it'd be good for me to learn, that particular component of it, just from a sales perspective, but he also wanted someone from a sales background to drive it. because we felt like they would be able to better connect with the field and whatnot. So, so anyway, I spent all of my time either in meetings with the top engineers from Microsoft, and I mean literally like their top engineers they would send down and they couldn't figure it out. So that was amazing because I'm such a strong technology guy. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was meeting with every leadless company on the planet trying to buy more leads and figure out how to do that, right? And that's what I did for a year. And you know, I will tell you that honestly, it was not my favorite job. Like I enjoyed that job probably the least of anything I've ever done because I enjoy customer facing interactions. I enjoy being out in the field. I enjoyed all of that stuff. And I went from doing that to sitting in an office in Chicago. So, so I didn't love it, but I learned a lot about marketing. And I think one of the biggest things that I took away from that, and it took me a while to kind of understand it later on, was, you know, when working with marketing on true demand gen plans for your sales org, I think it's really imperative to understand, you know, how they think about going about filling that funnel for you. And they don't have 100% responsibility for the funnel, but they've usually got a percentage of responsibility. And so under them being very clear and communicating back to you on, hey, I know that every rep's quota is X. I know that the closing ratio is 20%. So I've got to do a 5X on, you know, my quota for that. In order to do that, I've got to generate this much and, you know, total lead gen from these types of resources, which means I have to do this, which means I have to do this, right? And being able to back in an actual formula and communicate that and execute on that is really critical. And I will tell you that there's not a lot of marketing people that I've come across that know how to do that. Present company excluded, of course. And so, like as a sales leader, one of the biggest things that I think is critical is not allowing necessarily marketing to self-report, and only reporting on the things that are relevant to driving that funnel. And so what you see in a lot of marketing departments that I've been involved with, frankly, and again, present company excluded, is, you know, they'll talk about, oh, we did, you know, 5 million views and we did this and we did that, but that's where it stops. And they don't get down to all the other things that actually lead into conversion into revenue. And if marketing's not talking about revenue conversion, then marketing's not doing their job, right? And so I think that was what was good about it for me, is I learned a lot of that. And then, you know, when I went into the international markets, I had responsibility for marketing again, and so I worked a lot with those teams over there on conversion to revenue. And so, yeah, I mean, those were some of the big takeaways from it, but not my favorite thing that I ever did. I to this day I still gravitate towards sales regardless of, you know, what I'm doing. But yeah.
Cool. And
Will, why did you have to bring up Microsoft CRM?
Well, the good news, Pete, is we went back to, what was it called that we were on? Pivotal.
Oh God.
Back to Pivotal.
Oh boy.
But we tried for like 2 years to implement that in Microsoft. And I think that was your idea, wasn't it, Pete?
It was. I championed. You would think Microsoft would have it down. You would think. Oh God.
Hey, if it
all
makes
ideas
you feel
from
any
Pete would
better,
work.
I went to work for a really large SaaS company in the Valley, and they went from Salesforce to Dynamics, and they just went back to Salesforce. So we're not the only people.
No.
Well, Salesforce was awesome when it was 5 free licenses to start with.
Great,
should have stayed with them.
I mean, you just said pivotal. I got a little eye twitch, and I mean, I didn't even use that thing half as much as you did. Now I'm starting to have PTSD.
No, the only people like Pivotal were the contractors that customized it.
Yep.
That's so true.
Well, Will Emmons, thank you so much for coming on the show. What's the URL for your company's website and your book?
Just Renaizant.com.
Got it. Renaizant. The link will be in the podcast notes below.
Yep, and you can find the book on Amazon.
On Amazon.
Leadership app.
Leadership APP. Thanks for listening to the SaasHoles. On behalf of Jason, Jamie, KG, and myself, Pete, we thank you for listening, and we please ask you to Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to our newsletter in the podcast notes below. And you can always buy us a beer on Patreon. Please subscribe. Get on private consults we do once a month. Oh, my God, they're packed. We thank you for listening. Cue the music. Will, thank you, man.
Well.